BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Liam McLeod, and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. It's Wednesday, the 27th of November, and the Champions League's back.
Forrest looks to slip in, he does a wonderful ball, and Amina! Number 5! Johnston gets to the byline, into the bump, not dealt with, it's in! It's Hattati! Coon into the penalty, there he goes, going to get a shot away, curls one, goal! What a goal from Nicholas Coon!
Well, after lacerating Leipzig last time out, can Celtic beat Club Brugge? We'll find out what sort of opponents the Belgians will be.
They press the midfield very, very hard, Club Brugge. It's the one area in which they tend to work very hard, and that's going to be really, really key in this game.
And we'll hear the latest from inside the Celtic camp.
I think it's for us again another opportunity to show the power of Celtic Park, and we don't take it for granted.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
So thank you very much for listening, for downloading and subscribing. It's good to have you with us, wherever you are, wherever you're listening, perhaps in the morning commute. Big game tonight, of course. So we have a big guest, BBC Scotland's chief sports writer, Tom English. Tom, hello, how are you?
Big as in fat. Is that what you mean?
I wasn't meaning physically, Tom.
I do need to lose. I need to lose a bit of weight. But it's very subtle, calling me out live on the air like this.
Do you know, it's probably because you've been sitting down watching some wonderful autumn rugby over the course of the last month. You've perhaps not managed to have time down the gym. But hey, listen, it doesn't matter. You're back into the football now. But
yes,
it has been a successful autumn series. We won't go into it because you've got your own podcast with Andy Buck.
Yes. Listen to the Scotland Rugby podcast. It's all there.
Yeah, it's I believe a sister podcast. You call that anyway. It's about the football on this one, as everyone knows, and we've got lots to discuss. Tom, we've got a huge match coming up on Wednesday evening. Celtic, I think, possibly just a point, potentially maybe 3 away from securing a place in the knockout playoff round. They'll perhaps be aiming higher than that. Mm-hmm. We're going to hear from Belgian football expert Scott Coyne a little bit later. He'll tell us what Celtic can expect from Club Brugge. But the Scottish champions are going into this in fine fettle, are they not?
They certainly are, yeah. You know, I looked at peak Postecoglou, as in his second season, the start of his second season, which I thought was exceptional. And Celtic are, in terms of league football, Celtic are a point ahead of where Postecoglou was. They haven't scored quite as many goals, but they're not far off it. Bear in mind that Postecoglou's team in the first half of that, or the first third of that season, won 9-0 against Dundee United, 6-1 against Hibs, 5-0 against Kilmarnock. So Rodgers' team are very close to that level now. And they're better than Postecoglou's team in Europe over the last couple of games. So I think they've made... Everyone expected Celtic to win the league and probably win it comfortably, which I think they will. The big question mark everyone was asking was Europe, and they have absolutely made definite strides over the last 2 games.
Yeah, it's there for all to see, isn't it? I mean, there's proper tangible progress there. And it's not just the nature of the results that they've had, with the exception of Dortmund, obviously. It's the performances as well. They've matched it. And you're talking about previous seasons there. Their first 12 games of this campaign it's right up there with anything in the club's history. They're on the same trajectory as Brendan Rodgers' first season, the invincible season in 2016. And I think it's only 2003, 2001 and 2000 under Martin O'Neill, 1966 under Jock Stein, and 1906 under Willie Maley, where they've actually had a similar start to a season. So you're talking only 6 times previously in Celtic's long and winding history that they've actually achieved this kind of points haul. Obviously, it used to be 2 points for a victory, but when you look at that as 3 points for a win, they are as good as they've been at any point in their history.
Yeah, and listen, you can't. It's difficult to compare eras because the Celtic of previous eras would have been up against far stiffer, more talented competition than the current Celtic team are. But they can only beat what they can beat, and they've done it. It shows you Aberdeen have done so well to live with them, exceptionally well. Because Celtic are just they are a winning machine domestically. We all thought that they would be. But it's the strides in Europe that really, it's kind of surprised me, Liam, I have to say, particularly after the Dortmund game, which was just more of the same, more naive Celtic, vulnerable Celtic, giving up space, trying to go toe-to-toe with teams when they're incapable of doing it, not pragmatic, but something flipped against Atalanta, very controlled, very disciplined performance.
Do you think Dortmund and what happened there in the Westfalen, has that perversely actually been a good thing for them? I mean, on paper it wasn't. A 7-1 defeat obviously is bad news. But given what happened there, has that almost worked in their favour when you look at the performances and not just the results since then?
Possibly, but it didn't previously, I mean, Brendan Rodgers is on the end of some ferocious hidings in Champions League in his first incarnation, and obviously lost 6-0 against Atletico Madrid last season. Maybe it's the accumulation, Liam, of all of those results. I know Brendan was saying he wasn't going to change his coaching philosophy for anybody or anything. I think he has. I think he's tweaked it. I don't think he'll admit it, but I think he's tweaked it. Maybe he's realised, look, we need to do something a little bit different here. Maybe we need to be a bit more cautious, less gung-ho, less kind of the Celtic way and all that stuff. And maybe grind things out, stay in the fight, which I think they haven't been staying in the fight under Brendan Rodgers in Europe. They've just been going down in flames, and Postecoglou too. So Atalanta was certainly a shift for me.
And there is the final whistle. Brilliant result for Celtic, holding Atalanta in Bergamo, last season's Europa League winners. But Celtic have stood firm. What a defensive performance from back to front. Celtic were absolutely superb.
Yes, they rode their luck a little bit, but defensively I thought they were excellent. I thought they closed down the space. They were far more disciplined. Concentration levels were excellent, and they got a deserved draw. What I was really intrigued to see about Leipzig is, could they add a few bells and whistles onto that pragmatism? And I wasn't sure they could, because Leipzig are a very, very good side. But my God, they did. They did it way more than I ever thought they're capable of doing. Because I thought that was an absolutely outstanding performance. By any yardstick, that was a brilliant performance.
Hatate at the goal line for Taylor across goal. Goal! Nicholas Coyne again! From 3 yards out, Nicholas Coyne has turned it round for Celtic in first half injury.
It was almost a kind of coming of age in Europe performance from Celtic in the Champions League, not just in Europe. I was talking about maybe a point would be enough. That would take them to 8. I think there's a supercomputer has run the permutations hundreds of thousands of times, and it always seems to be that 9 points would be enough to get you through the league phase of the Champions League in this new loop competition. So obviously a victory takes them on to 10 and basically unassailable. They can't really not get through if they manage to beat Bruges this evening.
I mean, you look at the start of this, certainly after Dortmund, it was like, they could be eliminated here, right? They could be one of those clubs in positions 25 to 36 that are gone. And then you're thinking after Atalanta, gosh, maybe they can get an unseeded position here, 17 to 24 on the table. After Leipzig, you're thinking, hang on, with the way the fixtures are coming, on the back of that victory and how impressive it was, maybe they can get seeded from positions 9 to 16. I think to get into the top 8 is just going to be a step too far. I think they're going to have to win maybe, I don't know how many points they're going to need. Supercomputer says 15 or 16 is going to get you a seeded play or a top 8 place. They're probably not going to get there. But it doesn't really matter. If they get a seeded place and beating Bruges and beating young boys at home, that could be enough. If they get something from Zagreb, that'll definitely be enough. That is a brilliant result. If they get seeded in this table, that would be outstanding.
Yeah, because I would imagine after Dortmund, and that was match day 2 for Celtic, if someone had said to Brendan Rodgers, you're going to take 4 points from the next 2 games, you'd have ripped your arm off for it. You know, that was it's a great points haul. I wasn't at the game against Leipzig. I was making my way to Athens for Rangers Europa League match. I was working at that one against Olympiacos. But I heard it on the radio, and the Celtic Park atmosphere, and I've done enough Champions League matches at Celtic Park to know exactly what it's like. It just seemed to be taken up a notch, even from, you know, what it normally is. But that was the Celtic supporters reacting to what was an electrifying performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was in the studio, but even listening to the lads in the ground, I mean, it was deafening. You could sense the atmosphere coming down the line, and you could certainly see visually it looked spectacular. As you say, we've all been at Celtic Park on these nights before, and it's a pretty amazing place. But it was the performance. I mean, the fans did their stuff, right? The fans really always do their stuff. They always try and galvanize the team. But it was the two of them working in harmony this time. The team were doing their stuff. The fans were doing their stuff. And it was a special night for them. And Callum McGregor that night, I know there's been lots said and written about him over the years. I just thought he was just different class, you know. McGregor's got 5 goals already this season, which is better than his season-long total for 3 of the last 4 seasons.
McGregor on the edge, he's dangerous from this side. It's
gone in! I'm sitting watching
and it's gone in! Callum McGregor has another goal! What a brilliant start to the season the Celtic captain is having!
He's added goals, he's started to add goals again to his game, on top of his influence and his class and his leadership. And that night, I thought he was just brilliant. And I have the world of admiration for McGregor, not just because he's a really, really fine footballer, but because he's been through it with Celtic in Europe. You know, he's been there for the Dortmund game and the Atletico Madrid game and the 7-1 against PSG and the 7-0 against Barcelona. He was there for all those. He was there, Bodo Glimt and Sparta Prague and Cluj and Athens and Legia Warsaw and Maribor. Played in all of those games. Scars of those games must run deep. And yet he's still here. Here he is, still performing, still delivering. Some of his best stuff. You could argue, actually, that his performance against Leipzig was his best ever performance for Celtic in Europe. I mean, he thought he just bossed the show. I guess a really good side.
Well, he's going to be hugely important, obviously, for Celtic as the captain. Let's see if we can get an idea as to how Celtic are going to set up. We probably won't, to be fair. I'm not sure he'll give much away. But here's the Celtic manager, Brendan Rodgers, who is addressing the media on the eve of this huge match.
Yeah, well, the halfway point, I think 7 out of 12 we're really, really pleased with. And not just that, I think it's the performance level and in the competition that gives us confidence. But yeah, we'll get into our next run of games now, and like I said, we just want to accumulate as many points as we can. But I think 7 out of 12 is a really good start against the opponents that we've played. Performance level last year, and even though we didn't quite get the results, the wins that we would want, performance level certainly indicated to me that we were growing and developing at the level. And now in 3 of the 4 games we've shown a really high level of performance, different types of performances, but certainly the Red Bull game was a combination of everything that we would want. You know, the physicality, the pressing in the team, the aggression, but also the calmness in our defending. And I think when you can go away to Atlanta and keep a clean sheet, I think that gave us great confidence that at the level, and at the very highest level, we can be strong defensively. And then we take that into the Red Bull game. Same idea, but then we've got the home crowd behind us as well, so then the level of our football then gets elevated and we overall produce a really consistent performance. So I think that there, along with some of the other performances we've had over the journey in the last 14 months, has given us a real good hope to keep progressing and developing at this competition. I think it's for us again another opportunity to show the power of Celtic Park, and we don't take it for granted. It's one that I hope when I came back here it was to connect it, which was to have that off the field, that fire and that passion and emotion and bring that onto the field as well with performance level and a level of football that excites. So that was the challenge, and you can see when that is all connected what it brings.
The side, Tom, that started against Leipzig in the Champions League the last time out started again in Edinburgh on Saturday, and what ended up being a comfortable victory for Celtic. It was a difficult first half for them, but they got into their stride in the second half, and Hearts couldn't live with them.
Bernardo Farida, and Adam Ida converts, and Celtic making 3 massive moments count.
Nobody can live with them domestically as soon as they hit their straps, and they do that more often than not. Would you expect that starting 11, which looks on paper potentially to be their strongest starting 11, start this one this evening?
Yeah, like, why would you change it, you know? There's great cohesion in this team. There's partnerships have formed. There's great understanding between them. There's great belief. So, I mean, I'd be amazed, unless there's a few niggles that we don't know about. I'd be surprised if he wants to break this up, because it's a kind of a potent force. And again, I'm not judging that necessarily on domestic stuff, because I expect Celtic to do that. They're way better than everybody else, bar Aberdeen. Although in the league, in the cup competition, they showed how good Celtic can be. But everyone else, they're blowing away pretty much. And I judge them on Europe. I've always said that for the last number of years. You judge Celtic, yeah, great, you've won the league, well done. You've won the cup, well done. Notable achievement, and the rest of it. But what are you doing in Europe? How are you progressing in Europe? Are you kicking on? Are you going backwards? And for quite a while, they were stagnating, or they were just going backwards. Now they've got, I know it's only 2 games, 3 if you want to count Slovan Bratislava, but certainly the last 2 games, they have propelled themselves forward with some really mature performances, and I think actually repeatable performances, Liam. I don't think it was certainly not a smash and grab against Leipzig. This was a controlled performance, which I think they can repeat. That must be the exciting thing for Celtic fans. That may not be a flash in the pan, that they can deliver that again and again and again against good sides.
Rodgers has obviously, Tom, plumped for Trusty ahead of Scales recently. It's not been a great few weeks for Liam Scales. He was sent off at Wembley. Sorry to bring that one up,
Thanks.
Tom.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Last week in the Nations League. And he's found himself out of the Celtic team recently with the summer signing Trusty. They paid good money for him, obviously. And he's finally, along with the return to fitness of Carter Vickers, has dislodged Liam Scales from the team. Is that harsh?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure Liam Scales would say it's harsh, because he's been excellent for Celtic this season, last season. But Trusty's been very good as well. They paid a lot of money for Trusty. They're going to have to play him. He deserves to play because he's a good player. But like, you don't go anywhere in Europe unless you have a strong bench. Of course, you need a strong starting 11. But if you don't have a strong bench, then you're goosed. And Scales on the bench that's a good, now experienced player coming off the bench when required. That's good for Celtic. It's good for Brendan Rodgers. You need experience coming on, and he has it now. And I think that's a good sign. It's bad for Scales, obviously, because he wants to start. But these things change in the blink of an eye, Liam. It's a precarious world, elite sport. An injury to somebody, and Liam Scales is back in. And he, from my understanding of him, is that he's a very good pro. He's very diligent. He's not going to mope, and he can't mope. He might feel an injustice, but he will knuckle down and wait for his opportunity. And sure as fate, his opportunity will come, and he needs to be ready to step back in there.
They're up against a team in Club Brugge, who, as we mentioned earlier, they're in terrific form and stuck 7 unanswered goals past Sint-Truiden at the weekend. And obviously, as we mentioned, they defeated Aston Villa last time out. They were beaten by Dortmund on match day 1. Gitten's got a couple It was a difficult game for them, but it was 0-0 going into the closing 14 minutes of that. So it will represent a challenge for Celtic. There's no question. Brendan Rodgers will ensure that they're not complacent, having beaten Leipzig last time out. Tom, how's it going to go?
Yeah, you're putting me up against the wall here. I think Celtic will win. I think there is a danger of this being a banana skin because Bruges they don't have the kind of the big name or the big name players, but that Aston Villa performance is one to really take note of because that was a full strength Aston Villa team pretty much, and Bruges beat them. So you have to have massive respect for them. Brendan Rodgers will see the danger coming. There's no way anyone at Celtic is going to be complacent about this just because they've turned over Leipzig. So I think Celtic will be tuned in, and a performance like Leipzig, and they should win. And I'd say win comfortably. They don't need to win comfortably, just win and get on to the next game. So I think they will. I think they'll get the job done.
Tom, many thanks for joining us on the Scottish Football Podcast. We're not done yet, though. Tom's finished. He can take the rest of the day off. Thank you for that. What sort of opponents will Club Brugge be? To find out, I've been speaking to Scott Coyne, host of the Belgian Football Podcast. Club Brugge, a side that I think everyone's well aware of, have made good impact in European football across their history. Of course, they were in the UEFA Cup final in 1976. It's 2 years later, they were beaten by Liverpool in the European Cup final. Liverpool beat them on both occasions. Conference League semi-finalists last term, currently second in the top flight as they try and defend their title. But they seem, Scott, to be in pretty good form right now. Would that be fair?
Yeah, they're coming into this in fine fettle. They had a thumping 7-0 win at the weekend in the league as well. And they're coming off the back of a period where they've just been trying to find a little bit more consistency, really, particularly domestically. They've been struggling to dominate periods of games. They've been drifting in and out of games, and it's been, attracting a little bit of criticism for them. The Belgian league domestically is a little bit stronger than the domestic league obviously is in Scotland. So, the difference between the levels domestically and on the European stage are kind of quite marked. But, Club have been reasonably effective in Europe this season. Generally, the story of their Champions League campaign has been playing well, but not taking their chances. And the thing about this level is it really does expose you when you don't take your opportunities. They have dominated games that they probably should have got something out of in the Champions League this season, but missed their opportunities, and they're really going to have to take them when they come to Celtic Park because the league's phase has reached a crucial stage now.
Yeah, it really has. And you would have to say as well that I think whilst Celtic's fixtures have actually fallen relatively kindly for them, difficult games obviously, Club have had a difficult sequence of games. They've got difficult ones to come, losing to Milan and Dortmund. They've got Juventus and Man City to come. But really standing out is last time out against Aston Villa. A really excellent 1-0 victory over what is a strong Villa team under Unai Emery. Celtic faced them in Birmingham right at the end, as I was mentioning earlier on to Tom English. What's the ambition at Club Brugge when it comes to this competition? Has it been kind of exalted almost by their achievements of reaching the last four in the Conference League last season?
I think so. I think a little bit. I mean, Club are in an extremely good position financially at the moment. There are not many other sides in Belgium that really can compete with them in that sense. And that's mainly because they've won 5 of the last 7 titles in Belgium, which is guaranteed consistent European football for them. But for that one blip in the Conference League, where obviously the money's very different, although they were very close to reaching the final, and they're unlucky not to do that. Their consistent presence in the Champions League really has been very important to not only their transfer business, but them being able to continue to attract talent as well. I think they're realistic about longer term, about the impact that they can actually have. I think they do harbour ambitions to get out of the new league phase and reach the second stage of the competition. And that's where this particular fixture against Celtic becomes really interesting, because it's a very, very finely balanced tie. And I think a win for either side puts either of them in a really strong position to then progress. You know, you're talking about Club's remaining fixtures. The fixtures have been really cruel to Club Brugge, actually. It was something I noticed when they came out. Really difficult run of fixtures for them. They've got Sport in Lisbon, Juventus and Man City after this. So the game at Parkhead is really crucial, I think, to whether they're going to get out of the league phase. And interestingly as well, in Europe, they've been quite cautious in lots of ways. Head coach Nicky Hyen's been generally playing an extra holding midfielder, particularly in the away European games, just to provide a little bit more protection as well in games where they know they're probably going to see less of the ball. So it's about their efficiency, their use of the ball, and are they going to circulate the ball well and take the best of their opportunities?
A fabulous victory for them to keep this unbeaten run going at the weekend against Sint-Truiden. 7-0. Christos Giolis, who got the winner against Sturm Graz earlier in the Champions League, scored 4. Greece international. Scotland will be getting up close and personal with him in the Nations League, I would have thought, come March for that relegation playoff tie. How dangerous is he, and what are this team's main strengths?
Well, yeah, 4 goals for him at the weekend. And interestingly, he was talking about his fantasy football team in Belgium, in which he's named himself the captain in his own fantasy football selection.
That worked out well then.
This week. Yeah, so he's a confident lad. But yeah, I mean, key player for Club Brugge out in the left wing offensively. On the other side, Andreas Skov Olsen, the Danish winger, another really dangerous player. Somebody that Celtic goalkeeper Kasper Schmeichel will know very well. Compatriot of his, I'm sure there's been internal discussions about that. The front three at Club Brugge, really important. Solis on one side, Skov Olsen on the other, who I would expect to start. Didn't feature much at the weekend. Skov Olsen, that is, presumably been rested. And Hans Van Aken as well, the club captain, who's a bit of a legend at Club Brugge. 9 seasons there. 133 goals and 469, really influential player on the pitch and in the dressing room. He can play, in that holding role in the middle there offensively, and can also sit a little bit deeper as a deeper lying playmaker as well. So he's going to be somebody that Celtic are going to have to keep an eye on, a really experienced, kind of calm head. Similar in many ways to kind of Callum McGregor figure for Celtic, actually. Somebody that a lot of players are going to kind of look for to kind of be pivotal in that game. Something particularly to watch out for is who Nicky Hyen decides to start up front. First choice striker Gustav Nielsen is out with a long-term injury, so it's either going to be the Spanish striker Ferran Jutgla or young Romeo Vermaat, young Belgian striker who's really exciting, really good technical ability. I think it's likely Jutgla will start just based on what Nicky Hyen's generally done, particularly in the away fixtures in the Champions League this season as well. He just has that little bit extra experience, Jutgla, but I would expect we would see Vermaat at some point as well. But yeah, that front three is very strong, much like Celtic's front three. They press the midfield very, very hard, Club Brugge. It's the one area in which they tend to work very hard, and that's going to be really, really key in this game. I think there's going to be a lot of really intense dueling and interesting one-on-one battles in the centre of the park.
Just finally on Club Brugge, Scott, how's this match going to go?
I think it's going to be difficult for Club. They're coming into a real intense environment. I can see, I've been talking about this game a lot and getting asked about it a lot over the last week. I can see a lot of goals in this game, but I think Celtic are going to edge it.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Belgian football consultant Scott Coyne there. We also heard from Tom English and from Brendan Rodgers, and from the Celtic camp you can hear full live commentary of Celtic against Club Brugge on Sportsound on BBC Radio Scotland Extra. The programme starts with the big match build-up from 6. There will also be comprehensive coverage and live updates on the BBC Sports Scotland website and mobile app. There's highlights on BBC Television. Thanks to everyone who's taken part in this podcast. We'll, of course, have another edition for you on Thursday morning. Bye for now.
The Scotland Rugby Podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby Podcast.
It's just seismic stuff.
There's bucket hats as well. Oh, really? Yeah.
Is this a rugby podcast or is this a fashion podcast?
Why can't it be a bit of both?
Rugby. Let's get on to rugby.
There's a lot to be excited about.
Today's guest, John McGuigan.
Clubs are an absolute bedrock of everything Scottish rugby's about.
The Rugby Sports Sound Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
We cannot help but be so excited.
It's going to be the centre of the rugby universe.
BBC Sounds.